Good evening. Welcome to Unity Church of the Hills. We're glad you're here. You know, in this work that I've been in for about 30 years, I've bumped into some wonderful folks, some amazing teachers and authors and people in the movement. And along comes Dr. Joe into my life about a year and a half ago through his second book, and the one that really jumped out and grabbed me. And we began to work with that book here on a regular basis and teach it as best we could. And then we worked it out for Dr. Joe to be here through the auspices of Insight Events in June. And I had a feeling that he would be, as he presented himself on What the Bleep and in his work. But it's been a great pleasure to find that is really absolutely the case. Dr. Joe Dispenza is a great gift to all of us, and he is so because he sees the great gift, the geniuses that we all are, and has a tremendous ability to bring that out. So please welcome to our stage tonight, Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Thank you. I want you to turn to the person next to you. I want you to look them in the eye. I'd like you to introduce yourself as a genius. Let's begin. Now, before we begin, I have a few questions for you. How many people in this audience actually believe in the idea that the way you think has some effect on your life, that your thoughts create your reality? How many people believe that? You do, yes? So I have another question for you. How many people actually woke up this morning and consciously created a future? You know, the biggest reason why people don't do it is because you don't believe it's true. You see, if you knew that your thoughts created your destiny, if you knew that on a gut level, would you ever miss a day? Come on. And would you ever let any thought slip by your awareness that you didn't want to experience? So you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that you think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So then the same thoughts will always lead to the same choices. The same choices will always create the same behaviors. The same behaviors will produce the same experiences, and the same experiences will create the same emotions, and those same familiar feelings and emotions will drive the same exact thoughts. And your biology, your neurocircuitry, your chemistry, your hormones, your physiology, and your genetic expression will be always equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And so then, your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's sitting here today has created the present personal reality called your life. So would you agree then that if you wanted to create a new personal reality, then you'd have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it? Yes? And you'd have to start noticing those unconscious habits and behaviors that lead to the same experiences, that create the same emotions, that reaffirm the same identity, and decide if you want to act and choose in the same way. And then you'd have to look at those emotions that you've memorized, that have become part of your personality, and decide if you want to bring those emotions into your future. You see, most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it's impossible. We literally have to become someone else. So then, if you keep thinking the same way every single day and making the same choices that lead to the same behaviors, there's a principle in neuroscience. And that principle is nerve cells that fire together wire together. So as you repeat the same thoughts, choices, behaviors, and experiences, you're forcing your brain to fire in the same sequences, in the same patterns, in the same combinations every day. And as long as you make your brain work the same way every day, you're reproducing the same level of mind. And you begin to hardwire your brain into a very finite signature. And that finite signature is like the box of the brain. So then, thinking outside the box then would mean that you would begin to make your brain fire in new sequences, in new patterns, in new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. So the one ingredient that allows you to begin the process is information, is knowledge. Because every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your brain. That's what learning is. Learning is forging new synaptic connections. Remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. So then, the Nobel Prize laureate Kandel in the year 2000 found that when people learn just a few bits of information, they doubled the number of connections in a certain part of their brain from about 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. But if they didn't revisit that information and review it, within hours or days, those circuits literally pruned apart. So then, as you begin to learn vital information about the nature of reality, the new science of possibility, and you begin to wire that information in your brain, and you can repeat it, which, by the way, if you come to the workshop tomorrow, you're going to have to repeat everything that you learn, because you're going to have to wire it in your brain. So that in your weakest moment or your darkest hour, you don't talk yourself out of possibility. So as you learn just a little bit of information, you're adding new stitches into the three-dimensional tapestry of your gray matter. And if you can contemplate and think about what you've learned, you're making your brain fire in new and different ways. And when you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. So then, new thoughts should lead to new choices. And new choices should lead to new behaviors. And new behaviors should create new experiences. And new experiences should create new emotions. And those new feelings and those new emotions should drive new thoughts. And that's called evolution. So then, does your environment control your thinking, or does your thinking control your environment? Or we could say, does your personal reality create your personality? Or does your personality create your personal reality? So then your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a reflection of your external environment. It's an artifact from the past of all the things you've learned and all the things that you've experienced. It's wired or mapped in your brain. So if you wake up every morning and you get out of bed on the same exact side as you did the day before, and then you shut your alarm clock off with the same finger, and then you slip into your favorite slippers and you shuffle into the bathroom, and you use the toilet like you always do, and then you get up and you walk over to the mirror and you look in the mirror to remember who you are, And then you get in the shower and you wash yourself in the same routine way as you always do. And then you dress yourself and groom yourself to look like everybody expects you to look. And then you go downstairs and you have your breakfast the same as you did the day before, and you drink coffee out of your favorite mug. And then you drive to work in the same routine fashion, in the same route. And then you get to work and you do the things that you can memorize and do so well. And then you see those same people that push the same emotional buttons. You know, those people. And then you hurry up and you go home, and you hurry up and you eat, and you hurry up and check your email, and then you hurry up and watch your favorite television show, and then you hurry up and go to bed so you can hurry up and do it all over again the next day. Now here's my question. Did your brain change at all that day? We could say that you were thinking the same thoughts, performing the same actions, living by the same emotions, but secretly expecting your life to change. Would you agree? So then, as you go to the same place and see the same people and do the exact same thing at the exact same time as you did the day before, we could say that it's your external environment that's turning on different circuits in your brain, causing you to think equal to everything that you know. And as long as you think equal to everything that you know, everything the same, and you told me that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you keep creating more of the... Poke the person next to you, please. So you're thinking equal to your environment. So we could say then that it's your personal reality that's creating your personality. And it's your environment that's causing you to think and feel equal to everything that you know. So then you would have to agree with me then, to change is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than the conditions in your world, to be greater than the circumstances in your life. And every great person in history knew this, whether it was William Wallace or Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Joan of Arc, Madame Curie, Queen Elizabeth I, Abraham Lincoln. They all had a vision. They had a dream. Couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, couldn't taste it, couldn't feel it, but it was alive in their mind. It was so alive in their mind that they began to live as if that future reality was happening in the present moment. So then, can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet? But you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the experience has already happened. Neuroscience now says it's absolutely possible. So can you fall in love with the future potential that exists in the quantum field and emotionally embrace that future reality before it's made manifest? So much so that your body, as the unconscious mind, begins to believe that that future experience is happening to you in the present moment, and you begin to signal new genes in new ways that your body begins to change to look like the experience has happened. Epigenetics says it's possible. So if your brain and body are physically changed to look like the experience has already happened, relax. Because the experience is going to find you. And it's going to come in a way that you least expect. Now, why would it come in a way that you least expect? Because if you can expect it, it's nothing new. It's got to catch you off guard, and it's got to rock your world, and it's got to leave no doubt that what you did inside of you produced some result outside of you. And when you can correlate what you did inside of you that produced some event outside of you, you'll pay attention to what you did and you'll do it again. And when the experience finally shows up and you're caught up in the emotions of the experience, Those new emotions then inspire you and drive you to believe that it's possible. And you begin to build a neurological network that convinces you now that somehow you have a hand in your destiny. How many people are with me? So then, if you accept this paradigm, just in the littlest way, then you would have to agree then that the quantum model of reality says that your environment is an extension of your mind. That mind and matter are so intimately related, it's almost impossible to distinguish them apart. So if your environment is an extension of your mind, and you truly change your mind, shouldn't there be evidence in your life? I mean, why else would we do it? Shouldn't there be something happening outside of you because of the change you made inside of you? You with me? Now, when we embrace the concept of change, you know, if you're no longer going to think the same way or act the same way or feel the same way, you're not going to make the same choices that lead to the same behaviors, that create the same experiences, that produce the same emotions, that make you feel like who you are. The moment you begin the process, you step into the river of change. Now here's the old self, and here's the new self, and there's a void between the two. And when people begin the process of change, the moment they're no longer going to think like themselves, the moment they're no longer going to act like themselves, complain or blame or make excuses or feel sorry for themselves or judge other people, and the moment they are going to stop the emotions that keep redefining them, they just put their foot in the river. And now here's the problem. The moment that happens, it begins to feel uncomfortable. It begins to feel unfamiliar. It begins to become unpredictable. And all of a sudden, you're in the unknown. And this is the moment where people define themselves. Because the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you begin to inhibit those thoughts, choices, behaviors, experiences, and emotions, the body is craving the payoff, which is the emotion that you've become to define as yourself. And now the body's not getting that familiar feeling, and it starts to send a signal back to your brain, and it says, start tomorrow. You're a loser. It's not going to work. You broke a fingernail. Your day is ruined. And those thoughts are the body as the mind, as you'll learn, trying to unseat you. And if you listen to that voice as if it's true, that voice, that thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, that will create the same experience, that will produce the same emotion, and you will say, this feels right. No, that feels familiar. Crossing the river of change is the biological, neurological, chemical, hormonal, addictive, genetic death of the old self. It is a literal dying of the old self. And people will say to me, Dr. Joe, yeah, but I can't predict my future. I'm in the river of change. Well, the best way to predict your future when you're in the unknown is to create it. And only when you are in the unknown, when you are in that void, if you can begin to become comfortable with it, that the magic happens. So then, we invest enormous amounts of energy in building an identity that's connected to the old self. And where you place your attention, as you'll learn this weekend, is where you place your energy. So if you keep this facade, this ideal of yourself going for an extended period of time, all for the payoff of the feeling that you define as you, Because when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you wake up and then you go, oh, where's the feeling? Oh, there's guilt. Oh, whoo, whoo. Almost didn't know who I was. All right, now I can think about my problems and all the people that are related to it. Oh, my goodness. We look for that feeling. So then, the moment we begin to draw our energy away from the old self, that is the David and Goliath. That is Gandalf on the bridge looking at the monster. And as you begin to take your attention off the old self, it demands a certain amount of your attention. And now you are beginning to abandon it, and you are taking your energy and bringing it back, and you're driving it to a new future. And that first couple steps into the river is where people have to decide if they want to cross or not. But then, if you're in the river, instead of white-knuckling it through the whole process, wouldn't you agree that it would be a good idea to think about what thoughts you do want to fire and wire in your brain? And could you begin to plan your behaviors and begin to rehearse who you're going to be when you open your eyes and begin to change your brain just by thought alone? To begin to eliminate the environment and the people and things and places and experiences in your world and make the inner world more real than the outer world, until your brain begins to change to look like the experience has already occurred. You're going to learn how to do this, and there are people around the world that are doing it, and they're doing the uncommon. And so then, as the body begins to crave the emotion that we become addicted to that defines us, and you are like an addict going through the cravings and the changes, don't you think that you could teach your body emotionally, without the experience, what abundance would feel like ahead of the event? Giving it a sampling of the future. Now, the materialist would say, well, I'm not going to give thanks till my lover shows up. And I'm not going to be in joy till my abundance, finally is in my checking account. That's the old model of reality, of cause and effect. Waiting for something outside of you to change how you feel inside of you. And when that person or that experience changes how you feel differently, and you pay attention to who caused it or what caused it. And that event in and of itself is called a memory. But that's the Newtonian model of reality. Our senses defining reality. But the quantum model of reality is beyond your senses. Which means then, you begin to emotionally embrace the event before it's made manifest. And you can convince your body emotionally that it's already occurred, and those emotions are driving a new set of thoughts. Then you would have to agree with me then. If you do that properly, your brain and body are no longer in the past. They're literally in the future. And if you can give thanks before the event occurred, oh my gosh. We've been hypnotized and conditioned into believing we need a reason for joy. We need a reason for gratitude. That's the old model. But the quantum model says you give thanks before the event is made manifest, and you convince your body emotionally it's already done. Because what is the emotional signature of gratitude? Well, doesn't it mean it already happened? So if you're giving thanks, you move into a state of gratitude, your body, as the unconscious mind, begins to believe it's already done. And gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. So then, if you're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and you're in a new state of being, then you're literally signaling new genes in new ways before the event has occurred. And your body begins to change, as you'll learn this weekend, to look like the experience has occurred. You've already signaled a gene. The body's already in the future. And as a matter of fact, if you combine that model with the quantum model of reality, and you're observing that destiny, your body's going to be drawn to the event. So then, our senses should be the last to experience what our mind has created. And so then the materialist would wait for the event to occur to give thanks. But the quantum mind has already experienced it enough times that when their mind and body are in the future, they have a sense of knowingness. So taking philosophical knowledge, information, and initiating that information into your life to have an experience allows you to begin to experience the truth of that knowledge. And then ultimately, if you can re-experience it enough times, you begin to master it. You go from philosopher to initiate to master. And there are people around the world that are doing the uncommon right now. And we are in an amazing time. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And I can tell you from the movie What the Bleep, after it became an overnight sensation, the most common question that I heard over and over and over again was, how do you do it? And why is it so hard to change? Those are two questions I kept hearing over and over again. So then most people wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss to finally decide to change. We have to be knocked to our knees when we finally say enough. And when we reach that point where we're in crisis, we no longer feel like ourselves, and that's the first time we could actually see ourselves. Because you're beginning to look at it through the eyes of someone else. But my message is, why wait? You know, you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. Which would you choose? Now, the old model of reality that's been steeped in religion is that you have to suffer and you have to go through all the emotions along with it. And then it's time to change. But why not create the life you want in the state that you're in? So, after What the Bleep, we started teaching workshops around the world, not because I ever wanted to do it, but because people kept asking me, what do you do? And how do you do it? And so we taught these workshops for a year. And guess what happened? Nothing. I mean, some people had some changes, but it really wasn't amazing, you know? And I had to think, you know, if I was making a difference or not. And I don't know if I wasn't saying it well, or I just, you know, it wasn't being received. But after about a year, about 9-10 months, all of a sudden we started getting emails from people. And the first line of every email that we get is always the same. The very first line reads exactly the same. It reads, "You're not going to believe this. I actually applied this stuff and it works." And so we started seeing people heal themselves of different conditions, and it became exciting. And then we started to teach these other level workshops because people wanted to know more, and then more levels. And I never planned on doing any of this, to be honest with you. And we had an event in Colorado, and it was an advanced workshop, and the staff pulled me aside of the hotel, and they asked if I was handing out ecstasy on the breaks, you know. And so that particular event was very emotional for me because I started to witness transformation occur right in our workshop. And people were having a tremendous release of the emotions from the past. And so then at the end of that event, they said, "Come do another event." And I was like, I don't know anything else. Let's do another one. So we did another one. And in that event, we had 7 people have a spontaneous remission. They were signaling new genes right in the event. Some lady with chronic bladder infections and celiac disease and food sensitivities. One lady was living on lettuce for 7 years. was slamming pizza and eating hamburgers and all excited. And it caught my attention because all of a sudden I was witnessing transformation in real time. And I knew that something was going on inside of people. And then we did this event in Seattle, and this lady had MS. She was in a wheelchair, and she got up after her meditation and walked across the front of the room, unassisted, feeling back in her legs, signaled the gene right in the meditation before the experience. She wasn't waiting for something or someone to heal her. She emotionally embraced the potential in the quantum field before it was made manifest, and she intentionally selected that outcome. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you move into a new state of being. And she knocked on the door of the cell with an amplitude of energy that literally began to program the gene, turned on new genes and turned off old genes. And then we had another event, and another lady with MS from Texas, believe it or not, got feeling in her leg. Now I was totally absorbed because I knew on some level we were making a difference in people's lives. So then I started thinking we should measure this stuff. So we brought in a team of neuroscientists and quantum physicists, and we partnered with HeartMath Institute, and we started teaching these advanced workshops. And I can tell you from experience that people just like you are doing the uncommon. They're doing the miraculous. They're doing amazing things. And they don't have to be a monk or a religious person or a nun, or they don't have to be a male or white or any of that stuff that keeps us separate. They understand that there's an intelligence within them that's giving them life. And that same intelligence that's organizing all of those functions, keeping your heart beating. Your heart beats over 2 gallons of blood per minute. Over 100 gallons of blood in 1 hour. Over 100,000 times in one day through 60,000 miles of blood vessels. And your vascular system is 3% of your body weight. That you lose 25 million cells every second. Oh, you just made another 25 million. Were you thinking about that? That one cell of your body, it goes through the order of 100,000 to 6 trillion functions per second. Now multiply that by the 50 to 70 trillion cells that make up your body, and that communication is happening faster than the speed of light. You inhale 2 million liters of air a day, and within seconds, it's transported to every cell of your body. Are you trying to keep track of all of that? So there is an intelligence that's giving us life. And the question is, can you take time out of your busy day to begin to emulate it? Can you begin to develop a relationship with it, interact with it, show it what you want, but not as a victim, not as a fearful person, but you have to be divine. And when you begin the process of making that change, that same intelligence that's giving you life and organizing all those functions is the same intelligence that's creating supernovas in distant galaxies, keeping the planets rotating around the sun, causing flowers to bloom. It's both personal and universal. It's within you and all around you. So then, if you begin to ask for this intelligence to move in you, to move through you, and to move all around you, you are knocking on the door of possibility. And so I learned so many things in measuring people's transformation in the last year. I now know without a doubt that when you analyze your life within the emotion that you've memorized, that you think is you, the answer will never be there. Because emotions are a record of the past, and for the most part, you're analyzing in the box of the past. And when I studied people's brains that did that, their brains got worse. I can tell you from experience that if you use your brain to try to change your brain, it'll only make your brain worse. I saw it. If you use the ego to try to change the ego, you will only endorse the ego. If you use the program to try to change the program, you will only reprogram more. When you use matter to try to change matter, you will only become more matter. And only when you are true consciousness, and I have seen it over and over again, is when you have dominion to change your brain, to change your life, to change your body, and to create some future time. And so we taught these workshops because I wanted to see if it was true. I wanted to know what was happening. And we were lucky enough to catch people's brains that had Parkinson's disease at the beginning of our event. And 4 days later, it wasn't there. It wasn't just in their mind. It was in their brain. People who had terrible anxiety, you could see it in the brain scan. 4 days later, nothing. Traumatic brain injuries, where the brain is shut off because someone went through the windshield, who's wheelchair bound. 4 days later, normal brain. Stood up at the end of the event. It wasn't matter that was changing matter. It was energy that was changing matter. People who had enormous releases of energy from their body to their brain, their entire brain electrified. We caught it. And it wasn't that they were trying to create it, it was happening to them. And you think that that person can go back to business as usual in their life after just a few of those? Never again. So I became very interested in this concept called information to transformation. So if you give people information, you give them knowledge, and then they can repeat that information, they're beginning to fire and wire that information in their brain. Would you agree? Poke the person next to you, please. So then, if you wire that information in your brain, you can repeat it. Would you agree? And so what you're doing is you're seeing a picture. And as you see this picture, you're describing this picture. And you're firing and wiring in circuits, and you're building a model of understanding. Yes? So then, if you can instruct people on how to apply that knowledge and demystify the experience. Now, science is the contemporary language of mysticism. Science is the language to explain the unexplainable. It's not religion, it's not tradition, it's not culture. That divides audiences. And the moment you start talking in that way, people shut off. But science creates a community. So if you make science simple enough, where you learn a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the brain, a little bit about genetics, a little bit about how you function, a little bit about your chemistry. Knowledge is power, but knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment. And you can instruct people on how to apply that knowledge and demystify it to a point where they can begin to apply it in a certain way for the experience. And that experience produces some type of transformation. If you could measure that transformation, isn't that more information to teach transformation? Come on, and if you then measure that transformation, you gather more information to teach transformation, and you begin to close the gap between knowledge and experience. And that's what we did this last year. And the beauty behind all of it, and the most humble moment for me, was seeing people actually experiencing their true potential. And I really have no interest any longer in doing keynote presentations, or I'm not really thrilled about conferences. And I want to be with people that want to do it. I want to be with people that want to actually apply this. Because when you begin to apply these principles in a simple way, the end product of that is called magic. And there isn't a person in this audience that's so special to be excluded from this equation. That we are creators, that's who we are. And so, this weekend, this tiny little weekend, one day, to retreat from your life for one day, to remove the constant stimulation that reminds you of who you think you are, to no longer see the same people or go to the same place and do the same thing at the exact same time, to give your brain a break and your body a break from the re-identification of your world, long enough to learn new information, and then wire it in there and then have the experience. And when you begin to repeat the experience enough times, you begin to develop a skill. And we saw that in our advanced group, that most people, in order to change their brain state in the United States, it takes about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes for people to alter their state. That the average time for our students is under a minute. And some people do it in 4 seconds, and 5 seconds, and 9 seconds. Now, that's not like a race. Hey, look at me, I'm getting to the divine before you. But it told me one thing, that it was a skill. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And so when you begin to eliminate your external environment and you go within, as you'll learn this weekend, if you're analyzing and you're thinking, you haven't changed your brainwaves. And you're basically doing what you do with your eyes open. You're only doing it with your eyes closed. You understand what I'm saying? So then, if you keep practicing the techniques, you get to experience the fruit of your efforts. And I'm happy to say that in the last year, we actually have made scientific history because we have seen the uncommon happen so many times. So I'm here this weekend not to convince you that it's possible. I already know it's possible. I'm here to inspire you to apply it to your life, because the hardest part about all of this, you ready? Hardest part is making the time to do it. That's it. Taking time for your precious self to begin to change from the inside out. And the people who actually do it, you know, that heal themselves of rare genetic disorders that science said you're never going to change, medical science said forget it, that are living a new life with no evidence in their body, no genetic markers, nothing normal. You know what they say? My disease was my greatest teacher. That's what they say. Now, when they're crossing the river and they're fretting, they're not saying that. Why isn't it working? It should be happening. Once you arrive, you don't have those thoughts any longer. And so this year, I learned something truly amazing. I saw a handful of people with very severe conditions for 2 years change their health. And I pay attention to that because that's my background. And when I wrote my first book, it was really about spontaneous remissions and what those principles were and what was the neuroscience and the biology of it. And then I figured after I knew what common people like you did to get better, we should be able to reproduce those same things. In other words, we should be able to teach that. And it should be able to produce some effects. And then if we can keep producing those effects, we're creating a law, because anything that's repeatable in science is a law. So these 5 individuals that I had been tracking for the last 2 years, all of a sudden they started having very significant changes in their body. Like, no evidence of the disease ever existing in their body. All their blood values and all their urine analysis, all normal. They were given a clean slate. And it was this amazing moment when I started to talk to these people. And I had them write their testimonies down. Every single one of them reached a point where they have overcome themselves so much that they were so happy with who they were in the moment that they could care less if they had the disease. And guess what? That was the moment it went away. So when you're whole and complete and connected to a vision or a future is when it happens to you. And it was common in every single one of these people. And so when we try to create from polarity when we try to create from duality, when we try to create from trying and hoping and praying and wishing, that is not the state of being that produces the miraculous. That in order to be divine or emulate the divine, to be a creator, you have to be divine. You have to be expanded. You have to be invincible. You have to be unlimited. And when you bring up that emotion, you are signaling genes in new ways. So then this workshop this weekend is to give you some of the tools to do that. You with me? Poke the person next to you, please. So you geniuses still? Now, every time you have a thought, you make a chemical. And if you have a great thought, or an unlimited thought, or a joyful thought, you turn on a set of circuits in your brain that fires in a very specific sequence, pattern, or combination that produces a level of mind that makes a chemical for you to begin to feel exactly the way you were just thinking, great or unlimited or joyful. Now, if you have a negative thought, or an unhappy thought, or a guilty thought, you turn on a different set of circuits in your brain, and a different sequence, pattern, and combination that creates a different level of mind that signals the brain to make a chemical to match the exact thought you were thinking for you to feel exactly the way you were just thinking, negative or unhappy or guilty. Now, the moment you begin to feel the way you think, because the brain is constantly monitoring the body, you begin to think the way you feel, which makes more chemicals for you to feel the way you think, and then you think the way you feel, and then you feel the way you think, and you think the way you feel, and then you feel the way you think, and then you think the way you feel. And you do this for years on end. And the cycle of thinking and feeling and thinking over time creates what I call a state of being. Now, a state of being is when your mind and body are working together, when your thoughts and feelings are aligned to a destiny. Now, thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. You with me? So would you agree then if you thought an insecure thought, that in a matter of seconds you would begin to feel insecure? Yes? And the moment you begin to feel insecure, isn't it going to drive more insecure thoughts? Which is going to cause you to feel more insecure, and then you're going to think more insecure thoughts, then you're going to feel more insecure. And then you're going to say over time, I am insecure. And whenever you say I am anything, you're commanding your mind and body towards a destiny. Now, the redundancy of this cycle of thinking and feeling and thinking over time conditions the body to memorize that state as well as the conscious mind. And whenever the body knows as well as the mind, that's called a habit. A habit is when your body is the mind. Now, 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes that function just like a computer program. You subconsciously become the mind of that state. How many people are with me? 95%. So now it's going to come time to change, and you're going to use 5% of your conscious mind to think positively while you've been running the cycle of negativity for the last 35 years. And then you're going to create your dream board, with your hairstyle and your SUV and your fingernails and the big house behind you and a kid in the back with a perfect smile in the car seat. But you're going to feel unworthy. That's mind and body in opposition. You see, we have to recondition the body to a new mind. And that's where greatness comes in. So then, if you keep thinking and feeling and thinking in the same way over time, just like any program, the body will know how to do it better than your conscious mind. And when the body becomes the mind, now you're in a habit. And a habit is an unconscious, automatic set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that is acquired through frequent repetition. So then, you can't consciously remember your PIN number because you had 3 glasses of wine downtown in Austin. But then you walk over, you look at the keyboard, You can't consciously remember the number, but then all of a sudden your fingers press the number. How did that happen? You practiced it so many times that your body knew better than your brain. And that's where most of our personality exists. Now, how do we get this way? Feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences. And you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel. Now, when you're in the midst of an experience, everything you're seeing and smelling and tasting and feeling and hearing, all of your five senses plug you into the environment. And as you're in the midst of that event, all of this data is rushing back to your brain through those 5 different sensory pathways. The moment that information reaches your brain, it causes jungles of neurons to begin to organize themselves into networks. The moment those neurons string into place, the brain makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. How many people are with me? Now, because emotions tend to last longer, long-term memories, you can remember your first kiss. You can remember graduating from high school. You can remember a promotion, your wedding day, being proposed to, the birth of your children. You can remember going on vacation and catching a fish off the coast of Mexico and eating it with your friends and drinking great wine and feeling the breeze and seeing the sunset. But the problem is you can't remember what you had for dinner the night before, right? Because routine lulls the brain to sleep. And most Americans can tell you exactly where they were on 9/11. They could tell you who they were with, what time of day it was, and what they were doing. Because everything that you were seeing and hearing changed your internal state. And the moment you felt differently inside of you, you woke up and you paid attention to what caused it outside of you. And that event in and of itself is called a memory. So then think about this. You're geniuses, right? So if feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you're feeling the same way every single day, what does that mean? Nothing new is happening in your life? Yes? Now, if feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, are you thinking in the future or are you thinking in the past? And as long as you told me that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, as long as you're thinking equal to how you feel and you're thinking in the past, you keep creating more of the quantum model of reality is still working for you. Now, your body is your unconscious mind. And it does not know the difference between an actual experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. So if you're thinking and feeling in this loop for years on end, your body as the unconscious mind is believing it's in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The body literally believes it's in the past. And if you condition the body to be the mind of that emotion, then the body literally is in the past. And you can't create a new future while your body's living in the past. How many people understand? So now, when we react to something or someone in our life, the chemical change that's created in the body is called a refractory period in science. So you react to someone or something, and all of a sudden you feel different chemically, and you don't know how to control your emotional reaction to that event, and those emotions last for hours or days. You know what that's called? That's called a mood. What's wrong with you? Oh, I thought you'd never ask. I'm in a mood. Really? Why? What happened? Well, this thing happened to me 5 days ago. And I'm having one long emotional reaction. Now, if you have the same refractory period going on for weeks or months, that's called a temperament. What's wrong with him? I don't know. He just has an angry temperament. Why are you so angry? Well, this event happened to me 10 months ago, and I'm living by one long emotional reaction. I'm memorizing my emotion. And if you keep that same refractory period going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. And people wear their emotions layer by layer, and they believe that's who they are. That is not who they are. So then, would you agree with me then that in order to change your personality, you would have to look at the emotions that you've memorized that's become part of your identity? Yes? Now, did you hear me say, go back and look at the event and analyze the event? No, it has nothing to do with the event. When you free yourself from those emotions, then that's when you begin to liberate energy, because the body is no longer enslaved to the past. You with me? So then, you're a wonderful wife, you have a great life, you're living the dream, and all of a sudden, your husband comes home and he announces to you that he's moving to Buenos Aires with his 2 secretaries. And you're raising your children, and you got the whole dream going, and you're angry, and you're frustrated, and you're jealous, and you're envious, and you're sad, and you're going through all these emotions, and you know, you don't know this, but every time you think about the experience, you produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if the event was happening. So your body's re-experiencing the event 50 to 100 times in the day, and you're conditioning the body into the mind of the past. And then you call up your mother and you tell her, and then you tell your family, and then you keep talking about it, and you keep running the chemicals and firing and wiring the circuits in your brain, and it turns into a mood, and it turns into a temperament. It goes on for years on end. It becomes part of your personality. You're just that bitter, angry person. And so someone approaches you 20 years later and they say, why are you so angry? And you say, well, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 20 years ago. From a biological standpoint, what that really means is, I haven't changed in the last 20 years, and this event knocked me out of balance. And this emotion now defines me from that experience of the past. I haven't changed in the last 20 years. You with me? So another woman, she's living the dream, and her husband comes home and he announces that he's moving to Barcelona with his 2 secretaries and the IT guy. And now this woman goes through the same emotions. She's angry, she's frustrated, she's jealous, she's envious, she's bitter, she's hateful, she's judgmental, she's sad. And this goes on for a while. And all of a sudden, she starts to look at how she's feeling, and she says, God, living by these emotions isn't loving to me. And all of a sudden, she grabs the book on unconditional love, and she reads it, and she gets the companion CDs. She listens to those, and she comes to the Unity Church, listens to Reverend Steve, and she's wiring all this information in her brain, and now she's weighing the old beliefs against the new concepts, and now she goes to the dark night of the soul, and she realizes that all the answers have to come from within her. And in a moment, after weeks of learning this information, knocking on the door of possibility, it finally becomes visceral. And she says, oh my God, if I loved myself and I loved my ex-husband, I would free him and wish him the best. And she lets go. She shortens the refractory period of her emotional reactions. That's called emotional intelligence. And she gets on with her life, and she raises those kids by herself. She takes them to the baseball games and the soccer games and the ballet. She works during the day. She goes to school at night. She's up early in the morning taking her kids to the carpool. And years go by, and she finally gets her degree. Within 1 year of her degree, she scores a new job in Austin, Texas, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. And she gets a great job, and she's working with great people. And all of a sudden, within a year, she falls in love with the senior vice president of the company. And they travel the world, and then they buy a house in the south of France. And she spends her summers in France and her winters in Austin. Her kids get married and have grandkids. They graduate from college. Now you approach this woman 20 years later, and you say to her, yes, but your husband left you 20 years ago. What do you think she's going to say? That was the best thing that ever happened to me. You see, a memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom, and that's the name of the game here. So then, if you're living by the same emotion every day and you programmed it into your body to become the mind of that emotion, then you're viewing your life through the lens of the past. And when we begin to free the body from the chains of those emotional addictions, and the body settles into the present moment, and it's liberating energy, that's called joy. And that's when you see a whole new landscape. You see possibility that you never saw before because you're no longer viewing it through the past. How many people are with me? Now, are you still geniuses? Poke the person next to you, please. You're geniuses, right? So think about this. If you were thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking in the same cycle, according to our model, if emotions are the record of the past, then your body's not having any new experiences, and because it's not having any new experiences, it's not getting any chemical feedback from the environment. You with me? So everything stays the same, right? Now, if you were to take out one cell of your body, a skin cell, and you were to stretch the DNA out of that skin cell, it would be 6 feet tall, okay? If you took out all the DNA out of your entire body and you stretched it out from end to end, it would go to the sun and back 150 times. You with me? If you took all of DNA on everybody on the planet, the 7 billion people, and you scrunched it together, it would fit in a grain of rice. Now, your body is a protein-producing machine. You with me? Muscle cells make muscle proteins called actin and myosin. Skin cells make skin proteins called collagen and elastin. Thyroid cells make thyroid proteins called thyroxine. Immune cells make immune proteins called antibodies. You with me? So your body's a protein-producing machine. Now, in order for your body to make a protein, a gene has to be switched on, or a gene has to be activated. You with me? So, when they did the Human Genome Project, they went like this. They said, okay, let's see, there's 100,000 proteins that make up the body, so there should be about 100,000 genes in each cell. Well, it takes about 40,000 regulatory proteins to make those 100,000 proteins, so it's 140,000 proteins in the body. We should have 140,000 genes. How many people are with me? But one-to-one correlation. Well, when they did the Human Genome Project, guess what? We only express 23,000 genes. We have way more proteins than we have genes, which means then that each individual gene can have thousands of different variations. You with me? So then, 23,000 genes, you are 98% chimpanzee, 300 genes away from a chimp, 70% rat, some more than others, but roughly 70%. There are more genes in an apple than you have. So then, if an organism is facing adverse conditions in its environment, think about the Galapagos Islands. All of a sudden, this island just breaks away, or Madagascar breaks away from the typical environment. And the organisms now have to embrace the new conditions in the environment. With the changing conditions in the environment, the organisms have to behave differently and make different choices in order to adapt to those conditions. You with me? Poke the person next to you, quick. So if the organism's able to adapt and change its behaviors, it should have a new experience, right? And then the new experience produces new chemical information from the environment, and that chemical information then begins to signal the gene. And so by the redundancy of the same signal from the same experiences in the environment, you keep knocking on the genetic door, all of a sudden the gene turns on and it makes a new protein. So if it's cold temperatures, all of a sudden the organism, through the series of exposures, has thicker fur. Fur is a protein. If it's predators chasing prey, they have longer legs. If it's altitude, hemoglobin binds the oxygen more. It's a protein. If it's current, bigger tail fin, it's a protein. So then, as the organism begins to adapt to the experience, then it begins to produce different chemical feedback through experience that begins to signal the gene. So then if emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you're thinking and feeling in the same cycle, you're keeping the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off, and now you're headed for your genetic destiny. How many people are with me? You got that, yes? So then here's my question. What if nothing new is happening in your life? Can you signal the gene ahead of the experience? That's called epigenetics. So then, if you take a group of diabetics and you have them watch a comedy show for 1 hour, and you measure their blood sugar levels before and after they've eaten a meal and they watch a funny show, that within 1 hour they signal 23 new genes that begin to regulate their blood sugar. Turn on new genes, turn off old genes, just by changing their internal state. If you take a group of stressed out people that are executives, and you teach them how to relax for 6 weeks, to meditate and to breathe, they regulate 1,561 new genes. But if you're thinking and feeling in the same way every single day, you keep the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off, and now you're headed for your genetic destiny. And in fact, if you keep signaling the same gene with the same emotion that makes the same protein, sooner or later the gene's going to wear out. And it's to begin to make a cheaper protein. So then all aging is the result of improper protein production. What happens when you age? What happens to your muscles, your joints, your bones? It's all protein. Your hair, your skin. So then, if you could signal the gene ahead of the environment, then you may have the key to begin to change your health. How many people are with me? Yes? And so when we do the meditations in our workshops, and by the way, the advancing workshops, we're in and out of meditation all day long. You're changing beliefs and perceptions about yourself and your life. You're reconditioning your body to a new mind. You're finding the present moment. We are tuning into possibilities in the quantum field. It's an event where you participate. So our students begin to understand then that they could signal the gene ahead of the actual experience. Then they don't have to wait for their healing to happen. All they have to do then is move into that state of being and bring the elevated emotion, and that new emotion then is information that begins to activate new genetic expressions. Now, the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So then, when a person changes their internal state, they begin in a matter of moments to signal new genes in new ways. If you take a group of people, we did this experiment where they took a group of men and they brought them to a retreat center north of Harvard University. And they told these men for 5 days to pretend like they were 22 years younger. That's it. And they measured their finger length and their range of motion and their IQ and their memory retention and their height and their weight. measured all the range of motion of their spine, all these physiological functions. They measured their gait. And they set it up in the retreat center that there were pictures of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle, and there were songs playing all the time from, the great bands, the big orchestras, and they just pretended like they were 22 years younger. Well, the researcher, Ellen Langer, at the end of the experiment said, I was playing touch football with these guys. By the end, some of them throwing their canes down. Now, when they measured all of the values that they measured before they pretended like they were 22 years younger, they had longer fingers, they had more range of motion, they were taller, they had lost weight, they had scored 60% better on their IQ test just by pretending to be somebody else. So here's the question. Who are you pretending to be? Now, you have three brains. Three brains in one that allow you to go from thinking to doing to being. Your thinking brain is your neocortex. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. It's the seat of your conscious awareness. It's that walnut on the outside with all of its folds and valleys. And the neocortex plugs us into the environment, and it loves to learn information. And as you experience and you learn, you upgrade the hardware and the circuits in your thinking brain. You with me? Now, you read the book on how to ride the bicycle, how to dance the salsa, how to cook French cuisine, how to be more compassionate, how to forgive, and all that information is stored in your thinking brain. You with me? It's the intellect. It analyzes, it's the theologian, it's the philosopher. Now, if you take that knowledge and you apply it, or you personalize it, or you demonstrate it, it means you're going to have to modify your behaviors in some way and do something differently. So if you change your actions and you do something differently, then you should have a new experience. Would you agree? And a new experience then should reinforce the circuits in your brain that you understood intellectually, but then it would activate the second brain called the limbic brain or the emotional brain or the chemical brain, which is underneath the neocortex, and it produces a feeling or an emotion. You with me? Poke the person next to you, please. So then, you read the book on compassion by the Dalai Lama, and then you read the book by Mother Teresa on forgiveness, and you read the book about emotional intelligence, and you go to the workshop and you review your notes, and then you get on the teleclass seminar, and you're getting all this information in your analytical, intellectual, philosophical neocortex. And all of a sudden you start walking around in your life and you're saying, hey, you know what your problem is? You need to be more compassionate. You got a problem with compassion. Open your heart. Oh, and you over there, listen, you just need to forgive. Why hold on? And then, you need to get more emotionally intelligent. Shorten the refractory period. Come on, pick it up a little bit. And everybody is blown away by all of this knowledge that you're espousing. They're knocking on your door at work, asking you to administer to them. They want to know what you know, and everything's going really well, right? But then you're getting ready for the company Christmas party, You're putting lipstick on, you're getting ready, you got a little Motown playing, and all of a sudden, you get a call from your best friend. And she says, that person that betrayed you, the one that threw you under the bus, that talked about you and got the promotion and you didn't get it, she's at the Christmas party. Put down the phone, and all of a sudden you start rehearsing in your mind how you are going to poison her wine when she's not looking. You think about going into the bathroom, locking the door, getting her in one of the stalls, wham, against the wall a few times. You start thinking about how you're going to embarrass her in front of everybody, and all of a sudden, you stop. And you think, oh no, I read the book on compassion. Damn it. Now I got to do something. And all of a sudden, you start to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. You start to notice your knee-jerk behaviors. You start to become aware of those addictive emotions. And as you begin to observe them, you're no longer the program. You're the consciousness observing the program. And you begin to objectify your subjective self. And as you inhibit those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, nerve cells that no longer fire together, and you begin to silence the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self. And as you inhibit the thoughts that create the same feelings, you're no longer signaling the same gene in the same way. And all of a sudden, you start to think, what did I learn from those books, the teleclass, the seminar? What would Mother Teresa do? And all of a sudden, you begin to activate different networks of neurons in your brain from the knowledge you've learned. And as you begin to call up these different circuits, all of a sudden, you do something very natural. You put yourself into the equation, and you start to rehearse what you're going to do in the dinner. And very naturally, in a matter of seconds, you begin to cause your brain to fire in new sequences, in new patterns, and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. And as you remind yourself of who you no longer want to be, and you remind yourself of who you do want to be, you begin to install the hardware in your brain. You begin to prime the brain and begin to activate circuits and put them in place so that you can use them when you get into the dinner. You with me? So then you're sitting there and you're going, all right, what did the book say? See myself in her? Oh my God. All right, what else? Stay in the present moment. And you start going down this list, and you very naturally start thinking about you doing that. And the moment you begin to mentally rehearse doing it, plan your behaviors, you begin to cause the brain to believe that the experience is occurring. Because when you're truly focused, the brain doesn't know the difference between the experience out there and the experience in here. And now you're upscaling your hardware, and you have circuits in place to use when you get to the dinner. How many people are with me? And so now, you walk into the dinner, and you're reminding yourself who you no longer want to be. You're reminding yourself who you do want to be. You're thinking of Mother Teresa. You're thinking of the Dalai Lama. And all of a sudden, you get your behaviors to match your intentions. You get your actions equal to your thoughts. You get your mind and body working together. And all of a sudden, in the midst of your enemy, you have a new experience. And you do exactly what the book says, and your heart opens, and you feel compassion, you feel love, you feel freedom. And the moment you feel that emotion, you are now chemically teaching your body to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So we could say knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And in that moment, you are embodying knowledge. The word becomes flesh, and you're signaling new genes in new ways, and that second brain, called the limbic brain, is whipping up a batch of chemicals for you to begin to understand, no longer philosophically what it meant, but now you begin to understand it on a visceral level, and you are teaching your body emotionally to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. How many people understood? And now it's no longer philosophical. Your heart is open, and you're seeing through the lens of a different being because your mind and body are working together. But it's not enough to do it once. You can't forgive your enemy one time and expect to be on the stained glass windows in church. You got to be able to repeat the experience. You got to be able to do it over and over and over again. You got to be able to do it so many times that you neurochemically condition your body to memorize compassion as well as your conscious mind. And when you can get your mind and body working together, or your body to become the mind of compassion, or your mind and body to merge, now you're in a state of being. And when you're in a state of being, you activate that third brain called the cerebellum, the seat of your subconscious. Now you've practiced it so many times that you no longer have to consciously think about it. It's innate in you. It's who you are. As a matter of fact, you know how you do it, but you don't even know how, because it's subconscious. It's automatic. It's effortless. It's second nature. And when we get to that point where we have that level of competence, we could say that we've memorized an internal neurochemical order that no person, no thing, no experience could move us from it. And that's what we call mastery. How many people are with me? So how many people here know someone who's mastered suffering? It doesn't have to be you. It could be anybody. And you say to them, hey, did you read the book I gave you? No. Hey, did you see the DVD? No. Hey, we're going downtown Austin. We're going to watch some great bands. We're going to have a couple drinks. You want to come? No. What are they saying? I've memorized this neurochemical order that no person, no thing, no experience will move me from it. Now, we use those same three brains to memorize altruistic states of being. And the quantum field only responds to who you're being. Not what you're thinking, not what you're feeling, but who you're being. They did an experiment where they took a group of people that were very, very talented in praying. They're good prayers. And they said, it's a skill. They said to these people, now look, we're going to set 3 vials of DNA out in front of you. And with all of your conscious intention, we want you to see this DNA unwinding or rewinding. And so they kept seeing the DNA winding and unwinding, winding and winding, winding and unwinding. At the end of the experiment, they checked the DNA, and guess what happened? Nothing. Intention, getting clear on what you want, a mindful process, did nothing to change the DNA. So then they said to the people, okay, move into an elevated mood. Feel goodwill and gratitude and joy. And just open your heart and just emanate this emotion into the field. So they kept doing it over and over again, over and over again. They checked the DNA, guess what happened? Nothing. Elevated emotion did nothing to change the DNA. But when they said to those people, we want you to see the DNA unwinding, and then we want you to get into the feeling, give thanks for the DNA unwinding before it unwinds. Guess what happened? 25% of the DNA unwound. You see, the thoughts that you think are like the electrical charge in the quantum field. And the feelings that you emote are the magnetic charge in the quantum field. And how you think and how you feel broadcasts an electromagnetic signature that influences every single atom in your life. The thought sends the signal out, and the feeling draws the event back. So it begs the question, what are you broadcasting on a daily basis? Because if you are living in a state of misery or suffering, and you're broadcasting that into the field every day, what you're saying is, oh, infinite creator of divine consciousness, I am in the state of suffering, and I am broadcasting this signature into the field. Bring me another reason to suffer, but bring it in a way that I least expect, that surprises me, that leaves no doubt that it's come from you so that I can suffer a little bit more. You see, we're not punished for our sins. We're punished by our sins. So then, what if you woke up in the morning, and instead of getting up and doing the same exact thing, the exact same time, and seeing the same people, what if you eliminated the external environment? What if you put your body away, because the change is to be greater than the body? And if the body's become the mind, then you have to retrain it. And what if you said, I'm not going to live in my predictable linear time? And you said, what is the greatest expression of myself that I can be today. Let me master this one day as a lifetime. And you said, let me remind myself of the thoughts that are connected to the old self, and I want to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts, they would never slip by my awareness again. And what if you said, let me observe my behaviors. And just like you watching yourself doing a public speech or hitting a golf ball or hitting a tennis ball, if you can observe yourself, you'll self-correct. Wouldn't you agree? What if you said, let me just take a look at how I've been acting? And like Gandalf on the bridge, you said, you may not pass today. You may not pass ever again. And you made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carried a level of energy that was greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional addictions in your body. And your body responded to a new mind. And what if you said, these emotions that keep me anchored to the past, I will not drop to a lower denominator today. And you became clear of who you no longer wanted to be. You lit a match in a dark place. And then you said, how would greatness live today? How will I love? Can I be present? Can I open my heart? How will I behave? And you begin to think in new and unusual ways. And if by chance you're so caught up in your internal vision that the thought becomes the experience in your mind, and your body begins to produce the emotions ahead of the event, you're moving into a new state of being. Because how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. And now you're broadcasting a whole new electromagnetic signature into the field. And what if you said, I am not getting up from my meditation until I am this person? Now we're talking about greatness. And your body is bucking and kicking like an unbridled stallion. It's impatient, it's frustrated. Why? Because we trained it to be that way. And it wants to get up and open its eyes and do things to reaffirm the identity of the emotion that it's addicted to. And you're saying, stay, stay. Just like an animal trainer, the body is the animal. It's the servant to the mind. But when the body becomes the mind, the servant becomes the master. And most people think they're making all their choices with their conscious mind. They're making choices with their body mind. And so now, person is working on transformation. And the body is looking for its chemical rush. And it's sending signals up the spinal cord to the thinking brain. And it's looking, the thermostat in the brain, it's measuring the amount of chemicals of suffering or guilt or shame. All of a sudden, you're no longer thinking that way, and the body is craving those chemicals. It's modified its receptor sites. It's saying, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. You think you're doing all this? I'm doing it for you. You're going to quit right now? And all of a sudden, it starts to send signals back to the brain, and all of a sudden, you hear those voices in your head. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. Forget it. Start tomorrow. And you sit down with that body and you say, that's all you got? That's your best? That's it? Come on. And you say, come on. We're not getting up until we're in a state of joy or we are in a state of gratitude. And now you are conditioning the body to a new mind. And every time it wants to move to the past because it's emotional and frustrated or starts to anticipate the future, you bring it back to the present moment. Every time you do that, you're reconditioning your body to a new mind and you're liberating energy from particle to wave. And what if you got up broadcasting a whole new electromagnetic signature? And your job, by the way, is to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. You can't, do a meditation and be all spiritual and, feel all great, then get on the freeway and cutting people off. That's like eating an organic healthy breakfast and then spending the rest of the day eating junk food. Your job is to maintain that modified state, independent of the conditions in your environment, independent of the addictions or habits of your body, and independent of time. And if you can, get ready, because something unusual is going to happen in your life. That's the law. So then how is self-love built? So many people in this culture confuse pleasure with self-love. It's nothing to do with each other. It's not about a manicure or a new car or a massage, or not that I have anything against any of those things. But self-love is built when you're sitting there and your body is raging and it's telling you it can't, and you're sitting there and you're working with it. And sooner or later, it acquiesces and it surrenders to your mind. And I can tell you from experience, I have sat with my body for hours. And the moment I freed my body from the past, and there was that liberation of energy, the voice came out of my head every time, and it's always the same voice. That was so worth it. Because the moment the body is free from being enslaved, that moment you are seeing reality from a whole different place. So then you get up and you've overcome yourself and you've freed your body from the chains of the past. You've created a future. You're already in that future. And as my daughter always says, I just live my life as if my prayer is already answered. So how would you live your life if you knew your prayers were already answered? But that means then you have to get up as if your prayers are already answered. So then people are doing this around the world, and they're creating all kinds of wonderful things in their life. They're doing the uncommon, which, by the way, is our birthright. And that no material thing is going to bring us to true happiness. That our purpose in life then is to begin to look at those emotions that keep us anchored to the past and look at our habits that keep us defining ourselves in the same way and begin to remove those layers within us that block the flow of the divine. And as we begin to layer by layer peel those limitations away, the masks, that intelligence that's giving us life begins to leak out of us. It begins to consume us. Its nature becomes our nature. Its mind becomes our mind. Its will becomes our will. Its consciousness becomes our consciousness. Its love becomes our love. We become like it. We start to give. It is a giver. And so then, when that occurs, then all of a sudden you start to experience a level of joy that's coming from within you. That you're no longer seduced by the conditions in your external life, and you would never judge another person because you wouldn't want to lose this feeling. How many people are with me? Now listen, all of you in this room, every single one of you have done something great in your life. Would you agree? I'm talking to the part of you that already knows this. That all of you have done something that you are proud of, that you are in love with yourself for. There are no schools of ancient wisdom on the top of the Himalayas waiting for us to be initiated. Your life is your initiation. That the conditions and challenges in your life, the adversity, is for you to meet those challenges with a new level of mind. And I don't care. Listen, I react to things all the time in my life. The question is, how long are you going to do it? And if you want to teach your kids anything, teach them how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional reactions. They will no longer be hanging on to the past. So then, who gets to benefit from the changes you make within you? First, who? You, and then your family, and then the people you work with, yes? And then ultimately your community. Would you agree? So then, before we break, my last thought. How do you become supernatural? You would have to agree that you would have to start doing what's unnatural. Yes? When everybody else is in fear, that's the time to show courage. When everybody else is in lack, that's the time to give. When everybody else is judging, that's the time to show compassion. When everybody else is hysterical and racing to the top, you're calm and present, and you're already there. And if you keep doing what's unnatural, sooner or later it will become supernatural. Would you agree? And there's this concept in biology that I love. It's called emergence. Did you ever see a group of fish all do the same thing at the same time? Or birds, they do all that. Even neurons do the same thing. Now, if you study that phenomenon in biology, if you study it, you realize something really amazing, because if you look at that, you think there's a leader, like, hey, follow me, right? Turns out there's no leader. It's not a top-down phenomenon. It's actually a bottom-up phenomenon. You know what that means? Everybody's leading. Everybody's doing it at the same time. They're connected in a community, and they're all doing the same thing at the same time, and there's power in numbers, and they become one. You with me? So there's an unconscious stigma that all great people get it in the end, right? If you get too passionate about something and you lead with passion, you're going to get it. Martin Luther King got it. Gandhi got it. Joan of Arc got it. Abraham Lincoln got it. John Lennon got it. Everybody gets it in the end if you're an individual. So subconsciously, most people are like, ooh, I don't want to shine too much, But what if everybody's leading? Can't take out everybody, can you, huh? So the new consciousness that's emerging, the new consciousness is about us demonstrating all of this. To demonstrate it in every area of your life. You can't tell me you want peace in the world and be arguing with your coworker. Take care of that first. You can't tell me you want abundance, but you feel lack. You can't feel lack. An abundant person doesn't feel lack. They feel abundance. So then gold only attracts gold. Lead doesn't attract gold. So then we have to really demonstrate all the things that we want to see in the world. And if you're overcoming your fear and anxiety, and I'm overcoming my frustration and anger, and I'm working on me and you're working on you, we're more prone to really serve and give, and we begin to connect on a deeper level. And I can tell you, I have been around the world in the last 14 or 15 years, and I have seen transformation many, many times. And I can tell you it looks the same on everybody's face. I don't care if you're from Japan or China. I don't care if you're from South America. I don't care if you're from Canada. It all looks the same. That there is a liberation of energy. And that liberation of energy is what I call the natural state of being. And that's who we really are. So as we begin to remove those layers that block the flow of the divine in us, we become more like it. We give more. We care more. We serve more. We want to make a difference in people's lives. We consider the whole when we make choices. So great time to be alive in history. Great time because all of the models are collapsing. The political model, the economic model, the medical model, the religious model, the educational model, the environment, it's all collapsing. Because there's no longer a paternalistic view. Information is so readily available. And because of that, ignorance is a choice. And so then, if you begin to understand this, then, and you see through the illusion and the veil that keeps people separated and in fear and competing and hostile, because that's a great way to control people. But when you and I lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to take over, that's the time you give people permission to do the same. And this is a great time in history because people just like you are doing the uncommon. I was in Munich, and my assistant Paula was with me. And then from Munich, we went to Amsterdam and I did some events in Amsterdam. And then from there, we went to Barcelona. And when I was in Spain this past year, Spaniards are going through a crisis. And so they're holding on to this information because they have to think in different ways in order to adapt to the challenges in their lives. And so they asked me to come back to do an advanced workshop on the shoulders of the last one we did in the spring. So we were doing the event, and there's a woman sitting over here, and I recognized her because I had seen her in New York. She had flown in New York to come to an event that I was doing, and she wanted to come to Spain. And as I was walking out, she walked with me, and she said, listen, I healed myself of cancer, and by doing the inner work. So I said, email Paula the story, and I'll read it. And, because I love to read those stories. That's feedback. That's why it keeps me doing what I'm doing. So I read the story. I was in tears. And I had her get up on the stage in Spain. And she stood up and she said, I'm a woman from Holland. I'm Dutch. And I was living a great life. And my husband said, hey, honey, I'll be right back. I'm just going to go to the store. And he left, and he went to the top of one of the tallest buildings in Amsterdam, and he jumped off the roof, committed suicide. Now, she was so devastated and so shocked from the experience that it branded her emotionally. And she couldn't think greater than how she felt, and she was desperate and very angry at him because there was no signs, he just did it. And it was like a big, F you. Can I say that in this church? My mother wouldn't approve. So she was left with raising her children by herself. You get the picture? And the experience was so devastating to her that within a very short amount of time, she started signaling the wrong genes in the wrong ways. And you'll learn tomorrow about the hormones of stress and what they do long-term in the body. And the anger and the hostility and the frustration was the exact chemical elixir that signaled the gene that all of a sudden she couldn't get out of bed. She had her entire body in pain. And she stayed in bed for months. She couldn't get up. And the doctors didn't know what to diagnose her with except neuritis. But she couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything, so she lost her job. And she was a therapist. She lost her job. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't live. Her mother barely had any money, and now she's got to raise her kids, but she can't get out of bed to raise her kids. Are you getting the picture? So her life is going down very quickly. And so she reads the book, and then she starts doing the meditations, and in a very short amount of time, she's able to move around a little bit more. But here's the problem. All of a sudden, she starts developing these large lesions in her mouth, big sores. As a matter of fact, in all of her mucous membranes, not only her mouth, but her vagina, her anus, and along all the squamous cells, all the epithelial cells in her body. And now she's in terrible pain because that tissue is very sensitive. You with me? And from there, guess what happens next? She's still angry at her husband. She's still victimized by the experience. She develops esophageal cancer. And now, she's very aware that she's got to make some changes. And so, she's telling this story in Barcelona, and she sits down and she starts writing down every single thought that she thinks when she feels angry. And she begins to become conscious of her unconscious thoughts. And then she looks at all the complaining and all the blaming and all the anger and sadness and the actions and the emotions. And she becomes aware of those states of mind and body. And every day, she keeps observing the old self and surrendering it to a greater mind. And she made the choice that she wasn't going to get up from her meditation every day until she was in love with life. Now, I want you to reason this with me. Does she have any real reason to be in love with life? Well, to the immaterialist, she does, but to the materialist, she has no husband, she has no finances, she has no health, she has no friends. It sounds like a country western song. and sorry, I'm in Austin. And so, you got the car ready? So, every day she decides that she's going to do her meditation, and she is going to move into a new state of being. And she is going to marry a clear intention of who she wants to be when she opens her eyes every day with an elevated emotion, and she's going to signal the gene ahead of the experience. Every day. And the deal, she says, is if I'm not going to get there, I'm not going to get up until I'm in love with life. Now, she's crossing the river, yes? Now, she decided that she wasn't going to tell anybody in her life that she had cancer except her mother. That was it. Never mentioned it, never talked about it, didn't create an identity around it. And every day she crossed the river of change. And for 1 year, she told me she never missed a day. It was the most important thing in her life. All of a sudden, right around the 11th month, guess what happens? All of the sores start disappearing in her mouth. Why? Because when you're living in emergency mode, anger and hostility and sadness, that's mobilizing energy for your external environment. There's no energy in your internal environment, and of course her immune system becomes compromised. Now she's restoring her body. She's signaling new genes every day. And all of a sudden, the sores don't belong in that personality. It belongs in the old personality. Within a very short amount of time, all of a sudden now she starts noticing that she's feeling way better. She goes to the doctor a year later. There's not a sign of cancer anywhere in her body. Nothing. A little bit of scar tissue, she said, in her esophagus, but no lesions, no cancer. She's got a new boyfriend. Oh, new husband, right, Paul? New husband. She's got a new life. And she literally retired the past. She was born again in the same life. Now, is that possible? Yes. So then the process of change requires unlearning and relearning. It requires breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing a new self. It requires pruning synaptic connections, and you'll see pictures of that tomorrow, and sprouting new connections. It requires unmemorizing emotions that are stored in the body, and then reconditioning the body to a new mind and to a new emotion. It requires no longer signaling the same genes in the same old ways and starting to signal new genes in new ways. It requires deprogramming and reprogramming, losing your mind and creating a new one. We could say moving your energy out of the past and putting it into the future. How many people are with me? Now, when she finished her story, there were so many people sobbing in the audience. And when she got done, she wasn't saying it because, look at me, I did this. She really was honestly saying it because she was in love with life again. And of course she would be in love with life because every day she wouldn't get up unless she was in love with life. And now she has a life that she loves. How many people are with me? No longer a philosophical concept for her. It is actual reality for her. So the word meditation literally means to become familiar with. As you become familiar with your unconscious thoughts, your unconscious behaviors, and your unconscious emotions, and you make them familiar to you to know thyself, that means now you no longer are the program, but you are the consciousness observing the program. And if you could every day decide who you do want to be when you open your eyes, and you begin to rehearse the thoughts that you will think, the behaviors and attitudes you will demonstrate, how you're going to live that day, and you teach your body emotionally what nobility feels like, what empowerment feels like, what invincibility feels like, what strength and courage feels like, and you are signaling the gene ahead of the experience, and you get up in love with life, and you keep practicing it, you're firing and wiring those circuits in your brain. And if you keep doing it, it's going to become familiar to you. And if you emotionally embrace the experience before it's made manifest, every single day, it will begin to become familiar to you. And if you are thinking and feeling differently than when you started, now you are in a new state of being. And a new state of being is a new personality. And a new personality creates a new personal reality. And the disease, by the way, no longer exists in that new personality. It belongs to the old personality. And if you ask this woman how she did it, she will tell you the story of how she memorized those emotions and how those emotions signaled her genes. And she realized that she had to make a personal change. And it took her 1 year. Now, here's the question. Do you think she was afraid? Give me a nod. Yeah? Do you think she had doubt? How about another nod? Do you think that she was still bitter and angry at times? But was she aware of it? Yes. So then, would you agree there were days where she didn't want to do her meditations? Yes. Oh. Would you agree there were days that she was discouraged? But she did it anyway. And every time she chose herself, she fell more in love with herself. Because she said that was so worth it. So she is no longer a woman defined by her past and her trauma. She sees it as just an incident in her life. Why? Tell me why. Because she's got a new life. She's born again, and she looks back at her old life like it was another lifetime. So then, all these emotions that we experience, that we think is who we are, is not who we are. And tomorrow, we will learn the process of change. We will learn how to make that change. And when you move into a new state of being, it's time to command matter. And when I say command matter, that is you as the quantum observer observing a future. But you have to be big, and you have to be expanded, and you have to feel divine. You can't feel limited or like a victim or insecure. That is not emulating the divine. It's not in its consciousness to be that way. And people who do it, and they begin to create from this new state of being, have the experience sometimes the same day before they get home. It shows up in their life. So that person that healed themselves of cancer, just by standing up and talking about it, because of mirror neurons. You know mirror neurons? You know what mirror neurons are? They model behavior. You feed your kids, you go like this. You want them to model your behavior. Mirror neurons are modeling neurons. They imitate behavior. So if you see someone dance the salsa really well, you'll dance the salsa better, yes? If you see someone hit a tennis ball well, you'll hit it better, yeah? So then, if you see someone stand up and talk about healing themselves of cancer, won't you accept that it's possible for you as well? Didn't we say that? So then, the workshop tomorrow is basically a one-day, an introduction into these concepts. I'll show you pictures of neurons connecting and disconnecting. I'll show you what it means to use your brain when in a state of creation. I'll show you what it looks like in your brain and body when you're living in stress and when you're living in survival. We'll talk about the quantum model of reality. You know, viewing your life from the same level of mind every day. You as the quantum observer, causing infinite fields of possibility to collapse into the same patterns of information called your life. And we will talk extensively about what it means to change. And because when we move into these elegant states of being, and you feel profoundly empowered and so whole, it becomes a little irony. Because all the things you thought you wanted, you no longer want because you're whole. And it's impossible to want in that moment, and that's the moment it happens. So one day to retreat from your life as a foundation. And we're doing the intensive workshop here in Austin because it's the last time I'm doing it. We'll record it, it'll be available for people, but my passion and my interest really is in the advancing workshops, the progressive workshops and the advancing workshops. We're going to be measuring epigenetics in our advancing group. We do brain scans on people. We measure their heart coherence. We measure the energy in the room. We measure the energy around the body. We measure the energy centers of the body. And we see transformation happen sometimes in one meditation. And sometimes it's a woman. And sometimes she's over 70. Point is that common people are doing the uncommon. And so, I will be here tomorrow, and I will give you my absolute best. So I hope to see you then. Thanks for listening.